Hey, my name is Sarah Hefner. Welcome to H is for Homestead, where we believe anybody can homestead. Anyone can homestead does not mean that we think everybody should have tons of acreage and be milking their own cows and free ranging their chickens or whatever. It's more of a hard attitude, and we hope to teach you skills here to give you the confidence to homestead no matter where you live. Today, I'm going to be teaching you how to pressure can. Now, pressure canning can seem really intimidating, and I'm hoping to take some of the scary out of pressure canning and give you some really simple steps to follow so that you feel like you can do it and you can be confident in providing food for your family when you have an abundance now and you can preserve it for later. A couple of things before we get started. We're going to be dry canning potatoes today, and I first heard of this idea from my friend Ruth Ann Zimmerman over at Homesteading with the Zimmermans. I'll link her channel below. She gives much more in-depth about the potato aspect of canning and how to do that. I'm more focusing on pressure canning and how to do that. So if you want a little more in-depth about the potatoes and exactly how it all went down, you can check out her channel. But for today, we're just going to focus mostly on pressure canning and the simple steps to follow. Now, a couple things to be said about pressure canning. Pressure canning is not the same as using your Instant Pot. That's called a pressure cooker. Pressure canning is completely different. You cannot pressure can in a pressure cooker. This can't happen. So you actually have to have an actual pressure canner. I have two. I have a Presto pressure canner and an All-American pressure canner. And I kind of show them both through the process because we ran both of the canners all day long. The second thing to note is that pressure canning, you're not actually using water to get the jars up to the right temperature and the food inside. You're actually using pressure. So with water bath canning, you are using the water to heat the jars and the content inside to make sure you're killing any badness in there, botulism and all the scary things. So water boils at about 212 degrees, but that works well for acidic foods. But low acidic foods like potatoes today, you absolutely have to pressure can them because you can't get water to boil any higher than 212 degrees. And these need to come up to about 240 degrees to make sure that we're killing off any botulism spores. So the pressure canner, when used correctly, can come up to that 240 degrees. And that is why we're pressure canning potatoes. You can do the same for beans or meat or anything like that that's a low acid food. You can use your pressure canner. Water bath canning, you can do fruit and jams, and I even water bath can tomatoes. I like to add a little bit of acid, lemon juice or something like that to my tomatoes just to make sure I've got the exact acidity correct. But today for pressure canning, I just wanted to explain the difference. We're not using a pressure cooker, we're using a pressure canner, and then the difference between pressure canning and water bath canning. So let's get started. A friend of ours gave us about 15 gallons of potatoes, and we were so excited to process these. So all of my kids peeled them all, and then we chopped them into small pieces. This was a very long process to peel and chop all of these potatoes. Then we soaked them in water to remove the starch, and we let them sit overnight. But right before we went to bed, we drained the water and put fresh water in. And then the next morning, we put all the potatoes out on the table so that they could dry before we started stuffing the jars, okay? All of our jars were super clean, and I'm showing the girls how we're going to do this. So it starts with putting potatoes into the bowl. I put about a fourth of a cup of lard and then salt and pepper to whatever taste you want. My youngest daughter here is wiping the rims of the jars and putting on the lids and the rings and then bringing them to me. Once I have a full canner load, I fill the water with the same temp as the potatoes, which is room temperature, making sure that the little rack is on the bottom. And then I'm going to take it out to our outside canner. We're going to turn this heat on high at the beginning to get this canner heated up nicely. I also want to make sure that you know that you don't put your weighted gauge on while you're trying to heat up your canner. What we're looking for is a steady stream of steam coming out of the vent just like this. Okay, once this happens, you set your timer for 10 minutes. The reason we do this is because air is trapped in the pressure canner, and when that happens, it can lower the temperature obtained for the given pressure and could result in underprocessing. After that 10-minute timer goes off, now we can stick our weighted gauge on. The Presto canner here, I follow the gauge and wait until it comes up to the 10. For my All-American canner, I actually use the jiggler, and so I wait until it has been steaming for 10 minutes, and then I can put my weighted gauge on, or a jiggler, at 10 pounds of pressure. You will have to adjust this for your elevation, but 10 pounds is what I use. Okay, once your canner is pressurized to the correct pressure, you can then set your timer. For these potatoes, it will be for 40 minutes. I'm adjusting the flame here because it's going a little over pressure and I don't want to run my canners hot. For the All-American, since I'm choosing to go by this jiggler, I'm looking for 1 to 4 jiggles every minute to know that it's to the right pressure. Okay, my 40-minute timer is done, so I'm turning off the heat and I'm going to leave these canners and let them sit and come all the way down to 0 pressure before I remove the weighted gauges. So both of them are now done processing and they've come all the way back down to 0. I haven't touched them. So I'm going to take off the weights. Now this All-American canner's weight is kind of hot, so I always use an apron or a glove or something like that. I like to let them sit here for another 5 minutes just to kind of come to terms with the new temperature and the new pressure. Once I've let that sit for about 5 minutes, I bring my canner inside and I carefully remove the jars, making sure to stick them on a towel, and I leave them apart so that air can move all the way around them, and let them alone for 24 hours. I need to let them cool completely. At the end of this day, I think we had processed 49 quart-sized jars of potatoes. Really exciting and exhausting all at the same time. So the next day, I am going to double check that all of these jars sealed. I press on the tops, and then I also can just grab the lid and see if it pulls off. Basically, if it's pressure canned correctly, you probably cannot get it off with your fingers. So as I remove the rings, I will just double check all of these lids to make sure that they are completely sealed. If one of them pops when you touch it, or like press on the lid, then just pop it in the fridge and you can use it, within a couple of days and it should be fine. But most of the time, everything is sealed correctly when you follow all the instructions. So these all sealed correctly, and I just removed the rings. The rings are not necessary, and actually it can be dangerous to leave the rings on because it can give you a false seal. The rings do not hold on the lid at all. The lid will stay on because you've processed this jar correctly. So I removed the rings, and then I save them for other canning days. I use the rings when I'm processing, and once I'm done processing, I take them off. And then I clean the tops of the jars with a rag and dry them off, and then use my handy dandy Sharpie, which is like the homesteader's tool, the most amazing tool for large canning days. A really good Sharpie. I label the tops. I know it seems silly because it's potatoes, right? But you sometimes would be surprised. You just forget what's inside or how you processed it or whatever. So I write potatoes on the top and I write the date so I can, for my records, see how long did these potatoes last me? When did I process this? I'm experiencing this for the first time here in this house because I actually get to see, oh, okay, we processed this strawberry jam in May of last year, so we actually made it a whole year and a couple of months before we ran out. So the amount we did was pretty good amount. Anyway, so that's the benefit of actually labeling your jars. And that's it, guys. I promised it was going to be so easy. My favorite part is putting it all up on the shelf. It's so rewarding and satisfying. And remember, anyone can homestead.